From WXXI News, this is Healthy Friday. Thanks for joining me for this edition of Healthy Friday on Public Radio and online. I'm Elissa Orlando. Earlier this week, you probably heard a story here on Public Radio about a new film that's premiering at the Little Theater in Rochester on Saturday. It's called The Age of Love. It's an adventure movie. It's about the adventure of looking for love when you're between 70 and 90 years old. The film's producer and director, Stephen Loring, spoke with Beth Adams earlier this week, and he joins us today to talk about what he's learned about the mental and physical health effects of relationships later in life. Stephen is here along with Dr. Roger Askvig, a professor of clinical medicine at University of Rochester Medical Center and a geriatrician in our community. Thanks to both of you for being here today and spending some time. Stephen, you set out to make a story about love in later life, and you did it by documenting speed dating. For those who don't know, why don't you tell a little bit about the film and what you found out?
The film follows 30 Rochesterians who signed up for a speed dating event. They did not know they were going to be involved in a documentary when they signed up, which was kind of one of the challenges for me. I really didn't know much about love and age when I set out. I was trying to find out about it for myself, and I approached each person and said, I need a guide. I need a guide to understand the issues here. I need to know what's in your heart, what changes over a lifetime. What do you know now that you didn't know before? What do you know? What's changed inside and outside that will help other people in the society understand that love is not just something that you want when you're a teenager and then you forget about when you're old.
Did you attend this event and then decide to start documenting based on what you were seeing, or did you have a sense you were going to make a movie before you began to observe?
I had been searching for a topic, a way into the topic of age and love because of personal issues, personal things that happened in my life. My dad had passed away. My mom was alone and reaching 70 and didn't have emotional intimacy for the first time in her life. That same year, my uncle, who was in his mid-70s and had never been in a love relationship that we knew about, met a woman and fell madly in love. So I had two people in my life, one that had love all their life and now was dealing with losing it, and one that never knew what love was and was dealing with understanding it. And both at this advanced age when then there's not that much out there. There's not that much that explains the hearts of older people. So I was looking for a way in. I heard about speed dating for seniors. It was done in a couple of places around the country. And bunch of local organizations, Lifespan, Senior Fitness, JCC, they jumped on board and they said, let's have an event here. And I embedded myself from the very beginning. So from the time people signed up, I was involved in learning about the participants, their hopes, their aspirations, their insecurities, and went right from there through the event and all the way out on the dates that followed.
Right, and you followed them for at least a year, correct?
Well, I followed them throughout the 3-month period from the time they signed up through some of the initial dates they went out on with the people they met up with. And then I came back and followed up later on to see what had happened and how it affected them, because it did have an effect.
And that's what the film was about, the Rochester premiere of the film, which has been selected, incidentally, by the DOC NYC Film Festival, Cincinnati, and St. Louis Film Festivals, to name a couple. The film won the Paley Doc Fest film competition in New York City and is premiering at the Little Theater Saturday at 2 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. Here in Rochester. And the film does indeed illustrate the humor and the emotions and the impact of relationships, but it also, in a way, tackles a subject that can be a little uncomfortable, and that's intimacy in older adults. And that's one of the reasons why we invited Dr. Askvig here as a geriatrician. Does this come up in the general health picture of people that you care for?
It is part of what is anticipated, should be part of a periodic question that you ask individuals during their annual physicals or other significant changes of their health in time.
Do people want to talk about it?
Surprisingly, yes. Uncomfortably for physicians.
That's big of you to admit that. So physicians, do you think that physicians don't really want to tackle these kinds of issues with their patients who are older? And should they be?
Well, I think they'd like to. We don't have a lot of good training in how you actually explore that question, particularly in the geriatric population. gynecologists and to some degree urologists are more comfortable within their specialties of approaching it from medical standpoints. But primary care physicians, internists, geriatricians, family practitioners have a little more learning curve to do in their own practice to be able to understand the right questions. The other thing I think is when serious research is done, the findings aren't what necessarily was anticipated. And so we're actually learning from research about how older individuals approach relationships.
What are you learning?
That older individuals tend to be more egalitarian in the way that they approach relationships. It's more equal between the partners. There's research in Australia that looks at these sorts of relationships where young individuals are looking at relationships often with the idea of cohabitation. In Europe and Australia and places like that, the thing that are called LATs, living apart together, is much more comfortable because of the way they associate with each other, even in these very passionate, durable relationships.
All right, Stephen Loring, as the film producer, you mentioned that making the film sort of taught you to break some stereotypes. I did read an article in preparation for this interview about some of the stereotypes that we have about older people and whether they are sexy, whether they want relationships. These stereotypes of a chaste older person, the dirty old man phrase, those kinds of things. But you found that this film, the making of it, busted some stereotypes for you. What did you mean by that?
Well, the older people I spoke with, I mean, one thing that came up a lot was the idea of touch. And that's something I think that really, that breaks the stereotype. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable because here are people who've had, most of them have been in loving relationships. They've been in relationships where they've been able to touch, to hug, to have the intimacy, and suddenly, for a lot of them, it's gone, and they don't know how to deal with that. One man in the film says on camera, he said, "It's just not having somebody in bed there with me at night. That's a big change." He said, "I don't want to be obnoxious about it or anything." He even excuses himself because he's kind of self-judging himself by society standards. But he said, "Hey, that's part of life." And that really struck me because even my mom has said that, she would get in bed at night and she'd always just reach over and my father's warm hand would be there. And that was just a reflex. And now she reaches over and suddenly it's not there, and it just comes, that sense of loss of touch changes and epitomizes the entire change in her life now. Nobody to be hugged, nobody to hug her, nobody to hold her. So I learned that from the film for sure.
So Dr. Oskvig, when we think about older adults and loss, for example, or we think about a grieving process, you might talk about the health effects of loss. What is good for the health of people as they age to have relationships? What are the social and psychological issues that we're dealing with here?
Let me start off with one definition of health that I really have come to admire. It's not the lack of medical conditions, because we all have stuff, whether it's arthritis or high blood pressure or nervous stomach or whatever. We all have that. Health is defined by three things. One of them is the ability to do something important. The second is the ability to do something you enjoy. And the third is to have meaningful relationships. Relationships with friends, family, somebody to love, and that sort of thing. Those three things define health. And when you're in a situation where you lose one of those, you aren't healthy. We all have things.
So what do you counsel? What would you say in terms of counseling a patient? How would you know if somebody was isolated? How would you know if somebody was getting what they needed from that part of their health picture?
Well, I'm going to do something that's more what Steve has found, and that's I more often get questions of individuals who are feeling guilty about being able to love again, having lost a spouse with family or that sort of thing. And there's a saying, and I don't remember where it's from, that we don't need love to live, but if you find love, live it.
Okay.
And so for a lot of individuals, it's that permission to be able to have that contact, that intimacy, that ability to form a relationship and know that it's healthy. And I'll do one from a male standpoint. There's research that's been done over and over that show that men who are kissed once a day live longer than men who aren't.
Okay. All right, then.
I'd like to see that study.
I know, me too. I would like to also invite our listeners to join us, or if you're listening to us online, you can join us online as well. You can stream this program at wxxi.org, or you can call us at 844-295-TALK, 844-295-8255. If you're here in the Rochester area, you can call us too at 263-9994. We're talking about love in later life today. We have Dr. Roger Askvig with us. He's on this program with us from time to time. He's a geriatrician in the community and a professor of clinical medicine at University of Rochester Medical Center. And Stephen Loring is the producer of a movie called The Age of Love, which is premiering here in Rochester on Saturday at 2 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. at the Little Theater. Stephen, let me ask you about other things that you learned in the course of this film. What surprised you the most in following these folks that were the subjects of the film? And actually, we call them the cast of the film. Some of them will be at the premiere, too, correct?
Most of them will be at the premiere, and they'll be seeing it for the first time.
So what surprised you the most?
Well, a lot of things surprised me. I think following along with this conversation, one thing that it's not physical health, but emotional, mental health. Maybe I don't know if it's a health issue exactly, but it's the idea that things don't change that much. At the end of this speed dating event, all of the participants are brought were visited at home with their results, and they're sealed in an envelope, and they were asked to, how did it go? What do you think happened? How did you prepare? Were you nervous? And then they opened up the results and saw how many matches they had. And I was both interviewing and filming them at the time and didn't really know what to expect, but it's very eye-opening to me to see a 75-year-old woman open an envelope and start crying, and because she says, I feel rejected. I got 2 matches. That means 13 of the men rejected me. And I've had teenagers watch the movie and
same thing a 16-year-old might say, right?
That's me
right.
up there on screen, right. It doesn't change.
Yes, and other filmmakers that have made films that have focused on seniors have said the same thing, that as there was a pair of young filmmakers that made a film for public television about seniors playing ping pong. I'm not sure if you're aware of that film, and they talked about how they learned that these folks were no different than they were as young people, just the things that they wanted, their sense of competition, that there was a real sense things were different, but they learned that there were a lot of things that were the same.
But the interesting thing is, too, that while they are the same, they also judge themselves in the stereotype versions of society's judgments of them. I mean, they'll think that I shouldn't feel this, or I should be treated differently. They grew up in an era, everybody in the film they're not baby boomers, they're all the World War II generation, which makes them very much pioneers, I think, in taking part in an event like this. And they grew up, one man says, when my grandmother was 65, she was in a rocking chair. Now my mother's 94 and still lives alone. And there's a paradigm shift in the way we're looking at how we define that generation that didn't exist 40, 50 years ago.
Dr. Askvig, you're shaking your head as though you agree with Stephen. What are you finding that older people are a lot different than they used to be?
Well, I think we're just understanding that generation now. The fastest growing population in the country are the people over 65. Of that, the most rapid group in that are the individuals who are over 85. And so we're just learning who they are because there have been so few of them historically.
What kinds of things are you learning as you see patients and sort of interface with the community? What kinds of things are you learning about this generation?
Well, I think it's in part the things that are part of their decision-making process. For instance, pensions play a big role in how individuals are organizing their lives and what people are doing. What is retirement? In men, the number one retirement activity is keep working.
And so that's going to have an effect probably on relationships and on their
yes.
daily
the number one retirement activity of women is connecting.
So what do patients tell you in terms of what they need in these areas? Do they talk to you about these things?
Not unless we bring it up on most circumstances, unless it has an impact on things they need medically.
Do you bring it up?
Not as often as I should.
How would you go about it with a patient? I mean, it sounds from what you're both saying like maybe it isn't the most comfortable thing for people of this age group to talk about either. So how would you break the ice?
Well, more of my practice is in hospital-based medicine.
Right.
And so what I do with individuals who are admitted to the hospital is the first thing I want to find out is who they are, not what they have. So if I have a 94-year-old engineer, I need to be talking to him in engineering, but also to understand what his social network is, because that's how he's going to interact with what he has. Once I know who he is, it makes dealing with the medical issues different. And so, this is part of it. Individuals who are alone have a much different trajectory in how they deal with their healthcare issues than people who have somebody.
All right, Stephen Loring, when you were making the film, how did you find family relationships played out in the course of the film? Were children, nieces, nephews, grandchildren surprised that their relatives were going to a speed dating event? Were they supportive? How did you find that those relationships played into the story?
Well, I kind of stayed away from dealing with the families because I wanted to focus. I didn't want to really focus on what the younger generation thought of it. I wanted to give the voice, the missing voice, in my point of view in media, to the older generation that we don't hear. We hear about, but we don't hear from as much. There were people who were involved in the event who didn't tell their children that they were doing it.
Why do you think that is, or why did they tell you that was?
I think that there is the idea that, the children have a vested interest in what their parents are up to at that stage in life. You can't get away from the fact that money and property, it's a big issue, like what's going to happen to all the assets in the family. There's also the idea that we're the caretakers. We're the ones who really love and care about you, and now you're going off in some place that we can't, monitor you. We don't know who the people are who are, and there's just the feeling of family, I think. It was funny, I was filming one woman, and her son happened to walk in unexpectedly while she was being filmed, and he's looking around at the light and the cameras, and he says, "What's going on?" She says, "Well, I didn't want to tell you this, but I'm going to a speed dating." And he said, "Oh, really?" And she said, "Well, so you could have walked in here and found me with a man, on the doing intimate things." And he said, "Well, not on the dining room table, Mom." And she said, "Well, you never know." So it's like there's that the playfulness when the children aren't involved. You do see the youth and the exuberance and the desire kind of comes to the surface more, and that's what I wanted to focus on.
So you use the lens of speed dating, and we see these things like we see the issues that people are facing generally. What other things were the subjects facing? What other kinds of things are they dealing with?
They're dealing with everything that comes with age. I tried to pick as the people I focused. There were 30 people in the event, and I started filming all of them, but I tried to narrow it down to the key participants that had certain aspects of life. One of them had a disability. He had an oxygen tank, a hearing aid, and a cane, but he was determined that his soulmate was still out there. Another woman in her late 70s had never been married. That was a whole different area of exploration for her because she's still thinking, my knight in shining armor is going to come along, even at her age. So every person, the people who were widowed, people who had been in abusive relationships and had to deal with finding somebody else, everything that life brought, all the loves and losses of life were brought to bear, I think, in the way that they presented themselves for the film.
All right, Stephen Loring, the producer of the film The Age of Love, and Dr. Roger Askvig are in studio with us today for Healthy Friday. You can call us if you want to talk about love as we age. Our telephone number is 844-295-TALK, 295-8255, or send us an email at connections@wxxi.org. Jane's on the line. Thanks for calling in, Jane. Did you want to make a brief comment? We have just a few minutes left. Go right ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to say, my parents are now deceased, but my siblings, and watched what went on with that, was I think that the older people need to draw clear boundaries and declare their independence from their children, or else we get what I call this 20 years of premature trying to embalm them before they're dead, trying to appropriate their property, that sort of thing. And those lines, those boundary lines, need to be very plain. This is still my life.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jane, for the comment. We appreciate it. Did you find that the people that you interviewed and worked with felt a lot of independence, or were they nervous about what their kids or others thought?
I think that they were excited. People, almost everybody said there's just no opportunity. We want this. We do need this in our life, but society doesn't give us the opportunity. Going to a senior center is not always the best place to find what we're looking for. It's kind of like, she says, it's kind of the shutting down phase. It's not the growing place all the time. And so people who said, we need more. Society needs to see us as growing people, and we need to be given opportunities, and then they'll see what we really have inside.
And Dr. Aspig, as you're again looking as though you agree with Stephen. I mean, we do see in the community, even healthcare systems, we see seminars on nutrition. We talk about exercise, about keeping your heart healthy, lots of physical things related to our physical health. Do you think there needs to be more in terms of the kinds of things that are like this, more psychological, social?
Well, I'm going to answer it sort of indirectly. What's coming out with some observation now is things that are called naturally occurring retirement communities, NORCs, and they're almost all college towns. That these individuals, 70 to 100 years old, are taking over the apartments near these walking campuses where there's lots of interaction, lots of energy, and that sort of thing. These retirement communities, I love the comment of pre-embalming, don't have what a lot of older individuals really need and look for.
All right, Stephen Loring, as the producer of this film, what are you hoping happens here on Saturday? This will be the first time we've seen the film in Rochester, though It's been on the festival circuit. What are you hoping will happen?
I think the whole point of the film is to start a conversation about the topic that I want to. The reason that there's a lot of films out there about aging, and they're all great films. They all kind of, to my mind, address aging in terms of specific talent or a community or a segment of the population, or they're inspirational in some way. I didn't know that old people could. But the idea of addressing it through love is that it's not a talent or a skill that goes with age. It just goes with life. And I think if you're an older person and you see the movie, you'll be empowered by it. You'll think, wow, there's opportunity. If you're a baby boomer like me, you'll go, well, this is my future, and this is the things I have to start thinking about as the world changes. And if you're in your teens or 20s, you'll go, I'll never look at my grandmother the same way again. And every generation, I think, will respond to love, because we all know what it's like to suffer and search and struggle to find love.
And the 30 people that took part, in speed dating, of course, they had the courage to make that journey. There are a lot of people out there that don't.
Yes.
What do you want them to learn?
If they're holding back because they feel that it's embarrassing, or there's no opportunity for it, or their desire is being held in check by media or by opportunities involved, available in the world, that there's things that can be done to change that. And I hope the film, and Valentine's Day, I mentioned to you yesterday that we're trying to do a national opening on Valentine's Day that will screen in every state in the country, and try to really make people understand, and the media understand in a big way, that older people are thinking about their hearts.
All right, Stephen Loring, the producer, director, and the writer of the film, The Age of Love, that will premiere on Saturday at 2 and 6:30 p.m. at the Little Theater in Rochester. It'll be the first time we'll see it in Rochester. And Dr. Roger Aspig, University of Rochester Medical Center, thank you so much for being with us today on Healthy Friday. We really appreciate your time. I'm Elissa Orlando. This is Connections Healthy Friday from member-supported Public Radio.